So if you've been following the tech community for a little while, you know that this is 2020, and around February we're supposed to be expecting the new flagship Samsung Galaxy phone. But then just recently Samsung announced the Samsung Galaxy S10 Lite and Note 10 Lite. And then with all the hype surrounding these phones, you could almost forget that they are supposed to announce a new phone later on this year. And it's actually got me thinking, if the Samsung Galaxy S10 Lite exists, what's the point of the S10e? I mean, what's the difference between these two phones that makes them worlds apart or anything like that? So in this video, I actually want to do a little comparison to decide which one is better for you and which one you should actually spend your money on if you are planning to buy any of these two devices. So I'm going to start off with design. Now, we already know that both phones have plain designs. There's no fancy gradients or anything like that. Nothing like the aura glow that we see on the Samsung Galaxy Note 10. And I'm fine with that, alright. It's not anything needed. I do believe that the Samsung Galaxy S10e has way more colors than the S10 Lite. So it has prism white, prism black, prism green, prism blue, canary yellow, flamingo pink, while the S10 Lite just has prism white, prism black, and prism blue. So if you want one of these colors that is just not normal, like the flamingo pink or canary yellow, then the S10e is for you. But if you're not there for the colors, well, let's keep going. Now, I'm going to actually go straight to their processors. So the thing is, these processors are a bit underhanded, at least for me. Both are running Snapdragon 855s. Both have 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. But then the only difference between these two phones is the fact that the Samsung Galaxy S10e goes up to 256 gigs of internal storage with 8 gigs of RAM, while the S10 Lite maxes out at 128 gigs of internal storage with 8 gigs of RAM. Now, just for a bit of clarity, the S10e has another variant that comes with an Exynos 9820 chip. That's an 8nm process chip as opposed to 7nm process on the Snapdragon 855. In this comparison, I'm only comparing the Snapdragon 855 versions. If you are trying to think about the Exynos version, then definitely just know that the S10 Lite is for you. So let's keep going. We've talked about the processors. Now, display. The Samsung Galaxy S10 Lite comes with a Super AMOLED screen, 6.7 inches with an 87.8 screen to body ratio, 1080 by 2400 pixels with a 20:9 aspect ratio and a pixel density of about 394. Now, there is no specifications of whether it has any form of Gorilla Glass on it, but I would guess that it comes with at least Gorilla Glass 5 or 6. Now, the S10e comes with a dynamic AMOLED display, 5.8 inches, with an 83.3% screen to body ratio, and a 1080 by 2280p display with a 19:9 aspect ratio and 438 ppi. Now, that very high pixel density will actually come into play in bright scenarios when you're trying to use your phone in the outdoors and there's direct sunlight coming at you. It makes your phone all that much brighter. But then we already know that Samsung displays are probably one of the best in the market, so for them to reduce the pixel density in the S10 Lite, there's probably a reason, and who knows, it may actually be even more crisp than the S10e. But of course, no one has had this phone in hand for days to actually know anything about this. But there's that. Now, both phones run on One UI 2. Well, actually, the S10e runs on One UI 1.1, but you can upgrade to One UI 2, which has Android 10. The S10 Lite comes with Android 10 straight out the box. So if you don't want that hassle of having to upgrade to Android 10, then just go for the S10 Lite. Now, in cameras is another place where I actually think the S10e got a bit blown out of the water. Now, the S10 Lite has a 48 megapixel main camera with super steady video, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 5 megapixel macro lens. Now, the S10e has a 12 megapixel main camera, a 16 megapixel ultra wide camera that also supports super steady video, and that's all. Now, some people may actually argue that we don't take much of macro photos in a normal day, but then there are some people, especially people that are more into photography, that will actually appreciate the macro lens because it allows you to get up close and personal with a lot of these little subjects. But then it's totally dependent on the user. For me, that main camera with the 48 megapixel lens, as much as we know that 48 megapixels doesn't really make for a great photo experience, we already know that Samsung is very good with their image processing, even though it's a bit on the more saturated end of the scale. But then from other phones, we already know that it produces pretty decent photos, so I wouldn't expect anything less from this. And both phones support the super steady video, so if it was video you are now looking into, I actually think that the 48 megapixel lens will actually come in play in video because it now allows for a bit more pixels, and I think it can also allow you to record in higher qualities. Now, for video, both shoots to 2160p footage, but then the S10e can actually shoot 2160 at 60 frames per second, although there will be no image stabilization at that resolution. Now, the main headlining features of the S10 Lite and Note 10 Lite is the Infinity O display that is in the dead center of the top half of the top part of the screen. Now, the S10 Lite houses a 32 megapixel main camera there with an f2.2 aperture, and now the only thing I've actually noticed between the two phones, that's the Note 10 Lite and the S10 Lite, is that the S10 Lite has a much larger hole punch than that of the Note 10 Lite, and generally it's a 32 megapixel camera, so I wouldn't be even surprised that the camera hole is a bit large. So if you don't actually want that hole punch cutting into your display, well, you have to live with it, because even the S10 Lite has its own, except that it's at the top right of the screen. And actually the top right, I don't prefer the top right position. I've said this in some of my videos. The top left is better because there's practically almost nothing there for me. The battery information and signal information is always on the top right of the screen, so having the hole punch there, it's just a bit weird because I always find myself looking at my battery percentage and also checking for signal most of the time when I'm using my phone. Both phones also have headphone jacks, and they have active noise cancellation mics. So generally, from all this, I don't actually see something that will make you say the S10e is better than the S10 Lite. I actually think these are two phones that are just being sold together in the market, and it's just for you to pick any one you actually want. If you're picking any device, then I would actually tell you to go for the S10e, just because of that greater storage capacity that it has, even though both phones can actually be expanded up to 1 terabyte of storage. So that's even so, considering that also just makes my argument even a bit flimsy. So for me, if I were to go into the market, I'd pick the S10 Lite. Now let me explain why. It has Android 10. It has a larger screen with a 20:9 aspect ratio. It has HDR10 support. It has a more versatile camera system with a main camera that is a higher res than the S10e. The front-facing cameras are also a higher res than the S10e. The S10e's main front-facing camera is 10 megapixels as opposed to 32 megapixels on the S10 Lite. These features are things I know I can't live without, and we are very sure that both also support fast charging. So when you look at that, it actually seems like the S10 Lite is almost a better deal. But then there are some cons that the S10 Lite has. I just decided to pop this into the video. It has an optical fingerprint reader as opposed to a side-mounted fingerprint reader that the S10e has. That's practically the only downside to this phone that I can see. But then that should be all. Well, I hope this video actually helps you out to make a decision on which of these phones you would actually prefer if you are to go into the market. Now, for people who are following this channel, subscribers, you'd actually know that this isn't a normal kind of video I make. Normally, I'm supposed to be showing myself and doing all that kind of stuff. I'm having video recording issues, so I'm actually trying to work on that. I think within the next video or next 2 videos, everything will be back to normal. But that's all. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.